Look at Joey.
Cannot hear you, brothers and sisters. It's like I got cotton balls stuck in my ears.
Joey, this movie was really good. Thanks for showing it to me.
You're so welcome.
Only you didn't know you just did a face reveal.
Zachary Conan.
Joey.
Bader.
All right, and we just watched Nowhere, the Gregg Araki film,
97.
Help me, yeah, thank you. I'm still on. I was looking at the fucking Nowhere cast, and it was Nathan Bexton's name, and it said 77, and I was kind of panicked for a second. I was like, oh shit. But, all right, so this is actually really fun, because I like to cover a lot of different areas of cinema, all different areas, to be well represented, and I really do love queer cinema. And Gregg Araki, probably only along with Gus Van Sant, are like the two most important people in modern American queer cinema.
Yeah, he's definitely regarded as like a pioneer for new queer cinema, for sure.
Most definitely, yeah. The new New York queer cinema, I think, is what it's called too.
Although most of his movies are based in Los Angeles,
which is interesting, but. And it's not necessarily a blind spot, but I do, because I have seen a lot of queer cinema, and we are going to bring up some of the older ones that Gregg Araki was definitely evoking in this film. But this is only my second Gregg Araki film. I've only seen Mysterious Skin, so if I do have a cinematic blind spot, it is this man's work, and a movie like Nowhere definitely makes me want to check out like everything in his catalog. But luckily I'm here with Joey, who I think has seen every one of Gregg Araki's films.
Yeah, pretty damn close.
And Bader has
this is like my first movie of his, honestly. So
I thought you were like, this is like my first movie.
Yeah, hell no.
It'd be a great first movie.
Yeah.
If an alien came down and had never seen a movie. But let's just go around and do, well, I guess just me and you, Bader.
Mm-hmm.
Initial response to this film was like, wow. Yeah. Hyper moving, hyper everything, really?
Yeah.
I say hyper a lot, but this movie definitely deserves that title.
Yeah. It just felt like a fever dream to me. Like, it was insane.
But such a fast-moving fever dream. It's not like necessarily... It's really cool because it's not surrealist. It is postmodernist, but like the most hyper version of postmodernism. Like Quentin Tarantino can't hold a candle to the amount of crazy hoops and acrobatic like loops that Gregg Araki runs you through in this movie. And this movie I really like as well because I love 90s movies. Probably my favorite decade of film outside of the 60s for world cinema and silent films. Yeah. But the 90s is like one of the top 3 decades ever. But it's especially cool because the 90s is when the Americans fucking ruled. The Americans ruled the 90s. And we ruled it because we started using postmodernism, like the Tarantinos and the Coens and the fucking Sofia Coppola's and Spike Jonze's. We all started using postmodernism in the right way. And we did a lot of good in teen movies. And this is my favorite kind of teen movie. It reminds me, I guess, of the exact movie that it is. I just never seen it before. But like Nowhere is perfect. It's in that meandering kind of pointless. You can never call it nihilism because that gives it like too much of a... pretentious vibe to it. In fact, Araki like completely makes fun of nihilism in this film in a really cool scene where the character Elvis is being spanked by his girlfriend, who I believe is played by Jordan Ladd. Girlfriend, did I say that?
Yeah.
Well, this movie will confuse you when it comes to gender and sexuality.
I don't even know. Like, if anything, it'd be like Sisyphean.
Sisyphean, yeah. Well, what I was getting at with that scene was while he's being spanked, he says, like, I believe in nothing. And then there's a Nietzsche paperback book on the couch, too, which Araki focuses on very clearly. And, I think you could definitely call it absurd, but I think that even that, like, almost... Araki, I think, would be upset with you for doing that because you're applying a philosophy to a film that refuses to have or possess a psychology. Yeah. Like, it's almost supposed to just be an experience that washes over you because maybe in Araki's mind, like, the modern age that we live in is just this experience that makes no sense with all these different kinds of people. It's like Twister and just comes all over you. And Joey, you pick a topic and we'll start off from there.
Well, I mean, since you said the Twister thing, you picked up on it first. The first scene where you see Rachel True, like in reality, it's that pretty like sharp contrast to where it's like blaring music and she's wearing overalls that match the wall, and it literally looks like the Twister board game.
Yeah.
And you pointed out, it looks like Twister, and then sure enough, they get to the party at the end, and someone pulls out fucking Twister.
Yes. Okay, there's one way you could look at it that's really simple, right? And it's that, like I just said, this entire movie is like a game of Twister. It's all these different characters reaching over each other to put their hands on different colors, because it's all about bisexuality, too. So it's all about, just reaching into different fun things. It's all about having fun as well. But also, what interested me was that both of the women were POCs as well. So I'm wondering, but they were mixed, right?
Yeah, some of them were mixed.
So even then, that's the whole Twister thing, putting your hands on different colors. Never mind, cracked it open. Speaking of cracking it open, let's go into the way that Gregg Araki portrays some characters, and like cracking open Egg. We have a character called Egg in here. So Araki's, yeah, that was did you like that segue? I tried to say it so fast you couldn't realize like
Egg
the logical inconsistency of it. But we were all talking about the way that he portrayed a lot of the women in here as wearing braces and pigtails with names like Egg, an infantilized form of women. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
There's definitely they're definitely presented, because there's also the contrast, because then you do have like someone like Lucifer, who she's like, I think the only like self-identified like full-fledged like lesbian.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And she's probably the least infantilized of like all the women portrayed.
Yeah, I think she's the only one. That's
I would say Rachel True's character.
Rachel True as well, but it's interesting. I mean, we can't act like one gender was far more infantilized than the other.
Yeah, but I think it was. Well, I guess it was specifically like the hetero females.
Absolutely. Let's get into that, because I think we'll get into it better there, because this is this how like you guys feel sometimes when like straight people try to make gay characters and you're like, oh, this is nauseating.
Because like he really kind of took that and like made the straight people into caricatures.
Insane caricatures. Of course, it's Elvis and Jordan Ladd, and it's Ryan Phillippe and Heather Graham as like the analogs of the most hyper heteros you'll ever see. Like I don't know where to start. I mean, like, they just fuck each other in the open at parties, shove chocolate all over. That's all Ryan Phillippe and Heather Graham talk about is experiencing each other carnally.
Literally, she talked about, one of her neighbors or whatever was dead, and they found him with his face eaten off by his dog. And she was like, "That is so cool." Yeah. Like,
I think there was
literal like direct references to like carnivorous. Like,
and her name was Lilith, right?
Yeah. Which is literally based off of Adam's first wife.
And wasn't she carving a pentagram?
She was, and was like licking it and stuff.
Yeah. So this is like the inverse of like the gay stereotype
Pretty
as well.
much.
So it's like, these are devil worshipping, like, you know, like...
Well, no, for real, because the only like male on male like affection shown through the whole movie is like completely contrasted, being like Tinder. Like the only like male on male like kiss you see at all is James Duval kissing Bexton's forehead.
Yeah,
that was actually such a tender part for me. Yeah. And it also doesn't betray the language that Gregg Araki sets up, because, I mean, okay, let's look at the beginning and conclusion of that scene. It's completely absurd. Like, walking up to the window with, like, some antennae strapped to your head.
Wait, should we save that for later in the video?
We'll save that for later, but let's not leave James Duval right now, because Joey told me that James Duval is Gregg Araki's muse, basically.
Especially in, the 90s. Starting with Totally Fucked Up.
And I love muse pictures. I love auteurs and muses. I love seeing how people frame certain people. And it's interesting seeing Gregg Araki frame James Duval. Of course, it opens on James Duval naked in the shower, fantasizing, right? I think that Gregg Araki is really affectionate towards James Duval. He, like... You know, like the great muse and auteurs like Godard and Carina, or like Preminger and Seberg, like he made sure that James Duval looked very like attractive, very stunning, like every time he had him on frame. And I like that analog too, because I would maybe argue that like brung up Gus Van Sant before, but in My Own Private Idaho, with Keanu Reeves, like James Duval and Keanu Reeves have like the same kind of like energy. I immediately picked up on it because he has the same kind of empty delivery of like.
I would compare more less Keanu Reeves in My Private Idaho to Keanu Reeves in like
Bill and Ted.
Yes, literally Bill and Ted.
Yeah, but as like the image, as like the model, it's like it's pretty.
It's a
similar.
mix of the two. Keanu
Definitely.
Reeves.
I love the way he framed James Duval. Why do you think he decided to, if there is an anchor to this film, if there is a consistent main character, it's definitely Dark Smith?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Dark.
Yeah.
Why do you think he framed it around this character? Like, why do you think he chose this character as the lead out of every single one?
I mean...
Like, what about him? What about him was an interesting anchor? Like, he was just self-aware?
I guess so. That's probably what it is.
I think Gregg Araki was possibly like also like trying to speak through him, because I know Gregg Araki, like people think that Gregg Araki's gay, but he's actually bisexual. So I definitely could see where he's like using Dark as like a mouthpiece.
Well, if this is Twister, if this is about getting jumbled up or mixed up, and he is a bisexual character, it seems our bisexual characters are like the most kind of like enlightened ones in this.
Yeah.
As far as you can be enlightened in this movie, they seem to be the closest to it. Rachel True fell in love with her during this movie. I love seeing her in this movie. I wish she had more of a career, because I'd have to look at her filmography, but obviously the only one that comes to mind is The Craft. And seeing her in this movie, wow! Not only is she stunning, but if I had to give like best performance to that wasn't just full on camp, it would definitely be her. Most entertaining. I mean, Ryan Phillippe and Heather Graham had me rolling, but like Rachel True, I actually cared about that character. I actually cared about the relationship that she had with Dark Smith.
Even when they had her saying like the satirical 90s slang, like she delivered it with like a realness.
It's the way that he was framing. She might have gotten really lucky too of being in almost every scene with James Duval, and apparently, like, you can see the way Araki framed James Duval, especially when he's lying down in bed, and like it's really intimate. So if like she's in those scenes as well, she has that same kind of emotive appeal that Gregg Araki was putting on the James Duval. So it's kind of like his affection for his muse dripped off, and you know, whatever. Oh my god. Okay. So they're okay. So let's go into like auteur theory slightly here. You can tell. My only point of reference is Mysterious Skin, so I'm going to have to use that. You can tell that it's made by the same filmmaker because there are similar themes. The major similar theme is its hypersexuality, and that is focused on kind of like alternative sexualities, alternative lifestyles, whatever. But at the same time, there are alien subplots in both of these films. In Mysterious Skin, it's like... Bader, you don't understand. Mysterious Skin is like a straight-up like serious drama with like some hypersexuality and like hyper-violence and sad shit thrown in. It also has like an alien subplot. What do you think about the alien subplot?
That just threw me off, to be honest. At first, like, the first two scenes with the aliens just kind of went over my head. I was like, oh, okay, it must be a 90s thing. And then, like, it kept being consistent, and I was like, okay, what is going on here? Like, this isn't what I expected.
What do you think, Joey? Does he have a thing for aliens? Are they in other movies too?
Yeah, so they also kind of, not specifically aliens, but it's more so like the end of the world. It is also touched on in his movie Kaboom, where it has like a like sci-fi, like there's something otherworldly going on, and it's that one's like not specifically aliens, but it's very like it's presented in the same way.
Yeah. What's this trilogy called again? That this is a part of?
This is the final installment of the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy.
That's Doom Generation, and then
Nowhere.
The first one was Totally Fucked Up.
Totally Fucked Up.
And then
they're all James Duval.
Yeah, they all star James
Cool.
Duval.
We gotta watch it then.
Yeah.
We gotta cover all those then. All right.
And it's funny because he kind of plays very similar characters in each movie, where he's like the hopeless romantic that ends kind of tragically, honestly, in each movie. Like, it's kind of sad. He never finds a happy ending in any of these movies.
Well, that's definitely Greg trying to express something pretty pessimistic. But that's the thing. I wouldn't call this a pessimistic movie, would you? Would you?
Not really.
Did you leave this like?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, that final scene, you know?
The post-credit scene?
Yeah.
Okay, but you waited till the post-credit. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't see that post-credit scene. I just think I was pretty elated afterwards.
Yeah.
It was a rock and roller coaster, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
I mean, how do you get not pessimist from this? That's what I want to know. Because even disregarding the post-credit scene, like, what do you take away from that?
Because we have covered pessimistic movies on here, man.
Yeah.
This was not like a Stalker. This was not like a Solaris. This was
it's not
fucking
as pessimistic as
whoever-
like, the other
I mean, is he
movies,
ever going to
but-
be an optimist again after seeing his true love explode into an alien and crawl out his
But
window?
it's such an absurd scenario that you can't actually take it seriously
Right.
in
Yeah.
that scene, right? And you enjoy the tenderness, but that's after an hour and 15 minutes of hyper lunacy.
Yeah.
So
So it's nice to get that little break, but
exactly. No, I don't consider it pessimistic at all. I think
conflict of opinions.
I felt like pretty optimistic about my life outlook at the end of it. Because I don't think Gregg Araki. Do you think he was trying to make it pessimistic?
Not necessarily, but
Because I am thinking of
I mean
the videotapes that James Duval would make of himself, where he's like really desperately trying to articulate like something that like trying to articulate. Well, I mean the movie is called Nowhere.
Mhm.
It's a place that is like indescript. Like he
Yeah.
can't even articulate where he is mentally, physically, spiritually, or sexually.
Right.
Like I totally get that, but it is completely defined by Araki by like postmodern themes and tones, like with pop culture, with colors, with all sorts of things. It is very absurd in the idea that that's it. We're meaningless creatures in a meaningful environment, or vice versa.
Mhm.
So we're entirely meaningful, but we're in a meaningless environment, and that's why we're nowhere.
Yeah.
That's it. That's why it's nowhere, because the world that we live in is meaningless, and that we cry out for a meaning that just the world doesn't have any answer to. But the ending of the myth of Sisyphus, we brought up Sisyphus earlier, the last line is, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. So even absurdism has to be optimistic in spite of pointlessness. And this film is manic, and it is fun, and it is jovial, and it is very comedic in spite of its pointlessness.
Right.
right.
And a complete fucking lunacy as well. Like,
Yeah.
and I want to talk a little bit about the aesthetic, too. You talk about that, Joey. I love the aesthetic. I just can't quite articulate it well.
I loved it.
I would say, I don't know. I'm trying to think of.
There's so many stylistic things.
Yeah,
it's
there
hard
is.
to
It's like there's definitely a very clear homage to like pop art.
Yes.
With the color, like it's very like for example, there's a definitely like, well, I guess we'll get into that like deeper in a second. There's definitely like nods to Warhol.
Mm-hmm.
Even like the wigs, like Lucifer's hair being that like neon blue, like the way that's cut.
It's one of the most
like,
explosive postmodern films.
yeah, and definitely just their style and everything about it. The way the sets are, like a lot of those sets looking like they were like painted, and
those sets were beautiful.
And everything had a purpose. Like everyone's costumes were like their outfits were complementary to what the set pieces were behind them.
Absolutely. There's just so many different stylistic things that he borrows from. The Warhol one, I think, is the most important to an analysis.
Yeah.
But I remember the scene with the punk rock guy with the blonde hair, and like I think it was when Debbie Mazar's character was like over his shoulder, and it was
at
harsh.
The party.
No, it was before that. Like before he went home and like watched TV. When he was hitting his fucking nipple.
You're talking about Bart.
Bart.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember his. I love that character.
Yeah, that's Cowboy's heroin addicted boyfriend.
He was a wonderful character. Or at least he looked. Greg Araki photographed him amazingly, but especially in that scene where his nipple rings are being like ripped out of himself. But it's harsh blue and harsh red, and that's actually like Scorpio Rising or Lucifer Rising from Kenneth Anger films, avant-garde films from the 70s, New York avant-garde films. So you have that, but only in that one sequence, and then there's other sequences that evoke like Argento and Giallo Italian horror that was very focused on like hand painted sets. Like if you, like the bathrooms were like obviously hand painted blue. Like everything was just over blue, and there was like always primary colors. That, like, and then. I'm not being okay. I'm not going to be the fucking weird straight dude who just compares everything that's like slightly trashy to John Waters. I'm using that. I'm using that as a bridge in this film, though, to get to something else about the aesthetic. Because the aesthetic, of course, at first it felt like parts of it, like parts of the delivery, parts of the humor, did feel a little like a John Waters, like Desperate Living film. But
no, for sure.
But what I was thinking of more was. Hold on a second. All right, this is my girlfriend calling right when I was about to talk about gay porn from the 90s. Hey, can I call you back, babe? All right, I'm... All right, bye. Okay, so, like, it was, like, gay porn from the 90s. Like the acting or whatever.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Well,
spot on.
Talking about the John Waters thing, there was also just like the pure like filthiness of it. There was like a lot of belching, and then like Lucifer does like the fucking armpit fart thing. Like there's a lot of like there's a lot of like just nasty like because that's what John Waters is about. I think of like Pink Flamingos. With Divine, like it was just like pure filth.
Like that's what reminded me of like at first, but I realized that I was wrong, and I meant like with the aesthetic wise, it was more like I don't know why, but when like I imagine like 90s gay porn, I imagine
which you do frequently,
which I do like all the time.
Yeah,
I imagine like the fucking weird primary color based things and like the angles he would use. Like he went out of his way to make this like pornographic without being like hyper like.
Yeah, well,
raw.
even when because there were parts of the movie that was filmed on like a fucking camcorder.
Yeah, I'd say that the camcorder and the lights are kind of what.
Yeah,
like. I'm sorry about that, but that's kind of what like made it seem like a gay porn, pretty much. Like that's really what it felt like. Some of the scenes kind of just felt like
I think it was like the angles.
Yes,
it is the angles.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it
like
is.
especially like the upward shots of like the male torsos.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Sorry, I actually have seen a lot of 90s gay porn.
It's got that 90s gay porn aesthetic.
And honestly, like, even just the fucking intro to the movie that looks like it was made on Windows 95,
I loved it,
the earliest edition possible of Microsoft PowerPoint, like...
Even, like the 30-day trial of it.
Even the title cards are reflective of, like, the film's attitude about, like, Twister and things like that, because aren't they all, like, just
they're, like, flying around.
Flying around, like, over each other, like, you can't...
Yeah.
You have maybe 10 seconds. That's a long time. You have like 4 seconds to read like a name before it goes.
And I would say the acting also reminds me of like 90s gay porn, where it was just like.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but
no,
that's what it is.
But
it's
definitely
very campy,
Guillermo Diaz's, like the guy from Half Baked, definitely was like just did a gay porn role.
Yeah,
he was just like. Hey. I was about to do a bad impression.
Go for it.
No, dude, I don't even. No. Oh, man. And there are actually a lot of scenes of ultra-violence in this. One is actually, I think, really telling of maybe Gregg Araki's overall goal, or if he was trying to express an artistic message with it, like a commentary on art. There's a scene where the character Elvis, right, is bashing in the green-haired guy's head. But, you know, you see some... There are weapons available. He makes it very clear that there is a butcher knife. And you think that the butcher knife's going to be used, but no, he goes for the can of Campbell's tomato soup. And Gregg Araki makes it very clear, like clearly, like frames it in his hand so that the label's perfectly shown as he uses that can of tomato soup to bash in this person's head. And there's blood everywhere, and it's very chaotic. It's ultra-violent, highly stylized, hyperkinetic. And I think what Gregg Araki is trying to say with that sequence, more so, is that postmodernism has gone so far that it's like, as an art movement, that it's like literally cannibalizing itself, or it's just gone off the fucking rails in some sort of way. Because Campbell's tomato soup is the most popular image of postmodernism. If I had to define you what postmodern art is, I would just show you the Andy Warhol Campbell's tomato soup representations, different screen prints that he did of Campbell's tomato soup. Did you pick up on that as well, Joey?
Oh, I would say so, especially the way that as he's like bashing his head in, like every time he like lifts the can up, it's like covered more and more in blood. And then by the time
like
he died,
tomato soup.
Yeah, no, it was like the whole room was covered in tomato fucking soup.
And it has to be on purpose because Gregg Araki like had to call Campbell's tomato soup.
Oh like literally the can was like perfectly like
and
it was not an accident.
There's no reason you would use that can in this kind of film if you weren't trying to make a statement about Warholian art. Yeah,
especially because like the whole movie is definitely about like excess, and there's so many like I would say like the 90s was the first time, well maybe not the first time, but it's really like when it was at its peak of self like referencing and like talking about like things being meta like in shows and movies themselves.
Yeah.
Like I would probably say like more so than like, do you know what I'm getting at?
Oh no, I know what you're getting at. I mean,
like because I feel like
but
when
like
I
the
look
first,
back, well, because when I look back, like on different TV shows, like I think of like characters saying like it's the 90s.
That's when it really got infused with popular culture. I mean, like meta's been around since the dawn of film. The Great Train Robbery scared so many people because he turned to the camera and shot his gun, and everyone thought that the giant was shooting them in the theater.
Well, I don't mean,
but like, but so far as like the history of meta goes, sure, like Truffaut and Fellini like tested it, but not until the 90s. And I would actually credit. Godard did a lot of it, but I would credit so much of that with Quentin Tarantino, who we talked about earlier. Like, Pulp Fiction is a very, very self-aware film that knows that it's playing on tropes of pre-existing formats.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. It's not so much because like things, of course,
Pulp Fiction changed the world. I think it changed television too, and I think everybody caught on in some way. I'm making the square image.
Yeah, I was literally.
I'm sorry. Don't be a square.
I would say like definitely like. Meta was used as a tool in films before this.
Yeah, but not as an entire...
But it was like, they'll say the statement, oh, that was so meta.
I get what you're saying.
In the 90s. I think that was even a 90s popular catchphrase.
That's what it was. It's a catchphrase from the 90s. That's
like,
how it started.
That's so meta, you know?
Like you're saying, like self-reference itself tried to become like the new art movement almost. Yeah. And like kind of like fell on its face. And that's kind of what that scene is. It is self-reference upon meta, like destruction.
Yeah. Like, you can only go in so deep.
You can only go in so deep, and they're picking... Yeah.
And I would say, actually, that's even, like, represented in the camera work, how there would be, like, two different scenes, and it would bounce back between each other and get faster and faster and faster, almost like when you take, like, a picture of a mirror, and it just, like, goes deeper and deeper, and it gets more and more, and then it just explodes.
I do feel Araki's restlessness with this film. I'm even going to extrapolate a bit more on what we were just talking about. Like, I think that since Warhol, we've been trying to figure out, like, the next mode of art, like, the next interesting way to express ourselves that we could all get behind, some sort of banner, some sort of movement. And self-reference, I would just say, is a part of postmodernism, but I think that they took it. I think you're absolutely right. I feel his restlessness because this is Gregg Araki like desperately trying to like just do something unique, just do something, anything. Yeah. And I'm not being critical. I'm being like, this is Araki going like, we have no new ideas anymore.
Yeah. Well, you get to the party and it's like the height of like, what's the word?
Excess.
Not well,
sensory overload.
I'm forgetting the word now.
There's only one word you need to remember, and I think it's Gregg Araki's like response to that party, to the overwhelming like artistic value of it is whatever the shirt that they're wearing.
I think it starts with a S. I keep wanting to say sodomy, but that's definitely not the word.
That was the height of sodomy.
Oh my god. Basically, it's like okay, so
this is gonna bother you all night, isn't it?
so like, it makes me think of like the club kids of the 90s, like Party Monster.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
the makers of Party Monster definitely.
Around, to be honest.
Oh my god!
But you're thinking of a word starts with an S.
I think so. And it's like it means like basically in excess.
People are
It might
probably
not
This is
scream out
riveting.
the
This is
word.
riveting listening.
Yeah. People are probably like
I-
screaming the word at their screens right now.
It's literally on the tip of my tongue. It might not even be an S. I'm going to the fucking thesaurus right now because it's probably not even that important. But it
While
is to
he's
me.
looking that up, Bader, what's any character or scenario or scene stand out to you the most?
Just that can of soup scene kind of like shocked me, to be honest.
I think that is one of
because
the
I
most important
honestly
ones.
thought he was just gonna reach for the knife or something, or when they kicked the knife away, I was like, okay, that's
Because-
the end
Well,
of
it was
it.
funny because the guy had the knife in his hand. And he's like,
Yeah.
literally,
Yeah.
like
That was Araki
he'd
misdirection.
take his hand and he's like slamming it on the table. Like,
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that would have two meanings, right? That art cuts deeper than actual weapons, or it could have like a kind of sardonic or like cynical meaning on that. Like, we don't need weapons anymore because we
Yeah.
just destroy ourselves with this bullshit pop art that we've been aping for the last fucking 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, Joey, any closer to that word?
no. In fact, the deeper I go, the further it gets away from
You're
me.
not.
I mean, we got it, right?
I mean, I would
No,
hope so.
I mean, because it's like a synonym, but it's like it also has its own specific meaning that like ties into like something I'm going to say, but I can't.
I think you just defined like a word. Just,
yeah.
Yeah.
like all words are synonyms. This is a good one. Okay. Another topic, Joey.
Oh God.
What did you? Okay, I don't know, but let's just do it one more time. I'll have just one more thing to say on it. The hyperheterosexuality or bisexuality. What did you think of the way that queerness was represented in this movie?
I would say it's like pretty interesting because
Yeah.
it's different. It's different from his a lot of his other films, especially his early films, because those were like very like explicitly gay. Like it was explicitly like male on male. Like James Duval, like and totally fucked up. Like he actually has like a real like sex scene with another male, and so it was kind of interesting the way it was framed in this movie because it was approached very differently. Like you have like Dark, who's this like hopeless romantic, and he's like bisexual, but he wants to be monogamous, and which is like kind of like the opposite of how bisexuality is perceived by society.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely framed more as like, oh, if you're bisexual, you're probably a
You're
sexual
just
deviant.
greedy, yeah.
And that was like the opposite of him. He just wanted like a partner. And so it's interesting how that was framed. And then the heterosexuals, like you said, were like,
We're just going to town, yeah.
And I loved it. I even feel like Araki was trying to frustrate and annoy normie straight people when they were
Yeah.
watching it too by opening up with James Duval's ass and then
Yeah.
never showing us explicit female nudity and
Yeah.
having
Yeah,
so
there was
many
no
wonderful.
explicit-
In fact, it's kind of interesting. During
Like, he teased us.
During like most of the sexual scenes, like the women are either like dressed, like they're like doing something to someone else, or it like I don't think you ever even see bare breasts the whole
No.
movie.
No, that's what I was saying.
And in fact, the closest you get is
was,
to Rachel.
It's a
yeah,
tease.
just nipples.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
it.
literal tease. I do think Araki is literally teasing his straight audience, and maybe he's saying like, dude, fuck off, my movies aren't exactly for you, man.
Yeah.
And I hope that you're a little frustrated by this, because also the short redhead character is just busting out of her
Yeah,
fucking bra
but you
the
never
entire
quite
time.
see it.
Never
Like,
quite see it, or
It's
the,
just
like
a tease, yeah.
it's all like teasing and frustrating his male audience, but he will show you tenderness through the lens of queerness at the end. That's his most tender moments.
Right.
I do
Yeah.
like that goal. That's a good.
Yeah.
This movie expresses a lot, actually, in an hour and 18 minutes.
Especially for its time, too.
The runtime's very good. Another topic.
I'm still trying to think of that word.
Oh my god! It better be like the most mind-blowing
Yeah.
word in the world.
Oh my
Watch it
god.
be like a basic ass word.
Yeah, strange.
Yeah.
I was gonna say strange. Is it cinnamon? Oh, I absolutely like adored this movie. Really, yeah, it was definitely chaotic. It was definitely there was some review with the pretty good tagline of 90210 on acid.
Oh yeah,
that's not a bad tagline. They should have used that as advertisement.
Because they even there's like a complete overuse of like 90s slang. Like it's kind of weird because the way this movie watches, it almost feels like it was made like 15 years later as a reference to the 90s, but it was actually happening. Ooh, Guillermo Diaz turned into daddy. But
they don't know why you said that.
You got to flash up the picture for that.
Oh, so God damn it!
You'll see a
More
picture
editing
of
for you.
Guillermo Diaz right about now. All right.
There we go.
But no, the overuse of like the 90s slang, like even Lucifer, I forget the actress, but she actually was in 90210. And
Kathleen Robertson.
She has that line where she's like, "Isn't it so bitchin'?" Like she it's
and
like,
of course that show is produced by Aaron Spelling, who also produced Charmed, and you also have Rose McGowan and Shannon Doherty on a park bench, infantilized with retainer braces. So even then, it's still within a 90210 vein, right? I also want to talk about, since we're on the topic of television, what is Gregg Araki trying to say with using like staples of classic 70s sitcoms in this film in very weird ways? John Ritter is the Jesus Hotline, Moses Helper guy. And also Christopher Knight of the Brady Bunch is also in it, like, almost speaking in tongues or like some sort of weird
I guess
David
they're like
Lynchian
German.
way.
They're like
that's just what German sounds like.
No,
Sounds
well,
like
so they have like some either weird like German or Swiss.
I
apologize.
Swiss. I wouldn't say it was German.
Well,
I could
I
be
don't know.
wrong.
I just pictured
God.
like you know, the fucking God.
I just called like all of Swiss, all of German language. Twin
Well, I'm
Peaks.
just picturing like it was very like caricature, like green overalls on a mountaintop. Like that's like, but literally, it didn't even sound like they were speaking English. Like it literally did sound like they were like speaking English as perceived by like someone who is German and doesn't know English.
Well, I thought it was
Like-
being perceived by someone who just had his nipple rings pulled out. Or something, you know? Like, I
Well,
thought
it's
the kid
also
was
interesting. Like he just comes through the door and you only see him through the neck up.
Yeah.
So the interaction between him and his parents isn't as weird until he goes into his room and then you see that he's just shirtless,
Bleeding out of his
and
nipples.
bleeding out of his nipples.
His room, apart from the first time we see Rachel True,
Mm-hmm.
is my favorite set. The set design in this film is fucking
Yeah, the
amazing.
lighting was really good too.
I
in his
loved
room.
who was that blonde-haired guy? Do you remember his name?
What, Brad or the actual
Well,
character?
the character's name was Bart.
or Bart.
Okay,
sorry.
that's all I need to know. Bart was
Yeah.
wonderful. I loved his room. Bart's
Yeah.
room was
Yeah.
awesome. Do you remember what it said on the wall?
I can't remember.
No.
It has these like nihilist scrawls all over the walls, basically. And dude, it's just such an awesome set with the blue hue and everything like that. It's
Yeah.
just fucking awesome. That set is incredible. Oh man! And like I said, he photographed Bart extremely well too. I love when he's saying like I believe along with Egg at the same time,
Yeah.
which is interesting that he would. Okay, tell me why he dialectically like aligns those two people in that scene. Why are those two people I know why she is. I know why Egg is. Egg was sexually assaulted, and
Yeah.
Right.
but
Well,
why
it's-
is he at the same time? Why they're feeling the same emotion? Araki is expressing that, but why is he?
I think it's because of like the drugs or something. Like that
I'm
might
trying
be
to
it.
think about
But
it.
Like I would say
Your shit means nothing to me. Your shit means nothing to me. I don't make sense. It don't make sense to me. I don't deserve to breathe. Yeah, nihilist scrawls all over his walls. You can see in this picture that I'm using. I'm sorry, but why? Why do you think he was so dispossessed?
Well, it's kind of funny talking about the contrast between two of them because you have like Egg, who is like the symbol of like kind of like innocence. Like her room is even like covered in like flowers.
yeah. It's very girly
And then you have his room that's covered in literal nihilism. So it's kind of like even if like just going on a artistic, like he wanted that kind of contrast of like hyper like masculine brooding nihilistic versus like, you know, the girly childish. And then it also comments on what they just went through. Because you have Egg, who is, even by her name, symbolized as being very innocent, new. And then has all of her like innocence taken
Yeah,
away
just
from
stripped
her
away
like
from
in
her.
an instant. Whereas Bart, from the very beginning, is shown like being in excess, like the opposite of innocence, like drowning in decadence and like literally, like he's the first time we see him, he's buying heroin, and then the last scene we see before he dies, he's getting his nipple rings ripped out by dominatrix lesbians.
I do love that like you were talking about the way he cut scenes earlier and like this kind of like staccato manic editing process that he would use. It was rhythmic, but it was still manic. And that scene where they're like talking to their television screen saying that they want salvation, it's about the ecstasy of salvation, because the only other scenes that are shot like that juxtapose two separate people but within similar situations are the erotic scenes. Like isn't there one with Ryan Phillippe and Heather Graham contrasted with James Duval and Rachel True?
No, it's them two contrasted with Elvis and
our two hyper heteros. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense then. Yeah, but that's the same kind of editing process, though. Like the stuff he would use there. He did use that same editing with James Duval fantasizing in the shower.
And it's also important that those two groups got contrasted because they're twins.
Exactly.
So
they are hyper heteros. It was just fantastic. Did you think that Araki was trying to... you've seen more of his work. Do you think he was trying to say anything? Do you think that he believes that sex and hypereroticism and drugs, this nihilist lifestyle that he seems to like to express, even in Mysterious Skin? I mean, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character would fit into this movie, like as a passerby. But do you think he thinks that this kind of lifestyle is empty? Do you think he thinks that sex is empty, or do you think that he agrees with Rachel True in that, sex is fun and we should have as much of it as we can before we're old and no one will touch us?
It's interesting because, like, I don't know, so many of his movies, they have, like, slightly different takes on sex.
Slightly different, yeah. Well, slightly different tone. Because Mysterious Skin is still nihilist sex, but the tone of it is like, this is bad.
Right.
But here, these characters enjoy what's happening.
Mm-hmm. What was your question? What was the original question?
The original question was just... I think it is an optimistic film, so I think that these characters, like Gregg Araki, is like, yeah, this is fun, sex is fun, but do you think that he actually means that? Or do you think he's being, like, not ironic, but, cynical or duplicitous of, like, this is...
I would say he was probably cynical
I don't know.
about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of interesting, because he frames all of the sex as, like, fun, and then the one person striving for monogamy, like, ends in despair and loneliness. Right. So
what's he trying to say there? You guys.
Probably just have as much sex as you can before you die. Like, that's really what I mean. Because again, if you try to be monogamous about it, like what he's showing is that you're just gonna like die alone no matter what. But with Rachel's character, at least she's having fun with it.
That's right.
She's not.
I mean, the last time we see her, she's being whisked off by those
two twins.
Yeah, the whatever twins.
No, not the whatever twins.
No, the blonde
male twins.
The weird blonde male twins.
The ones that like spoke at the same time.
I thought we saw her in the bathroom after.
No. We did, but we seen her again with the twins later. When Dark is sitting at the pool and she like.
I believe I was making my tea then. I was in the other room making my tea kettle. Oh, this movie was awesome.
I don't know. There's a lot to unpack because I don't know if you can just boil it down to like a
for a film that goes out of its way to seem pointless. It's like full of like a lot of like. That's the thing. That's what makes Araki so good here, because they're not complete meanings.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Sofia Coppola before, how they're not static beings, but her films are dynamic becomings.
Right.
Like this one is even like more challenging in that at least Sofia Coppola has a full statement.
Right.
Like you just have to unpack it.
Yeah.
Gregg Araki, I think, went out of his way to like give you like 3/4 of a meaning.
Yeah.
And then leave you hanging for that last quarter. Like you have to put it together yourself because he's not even interested.
If you watch that movie like multiple times, like each time you'll get a different outcome, pretty much, because there's so much going on.
Well, I saw a lot of like subliminal messages that just happened so quickly that I've seen this movie a few times now, and I didn't catch it till this viewing now. But one of the things that I stand out to me the most as far as like subliminal messaging and things like that was the use of the camcorder. And like, for example, you have the car scene where Dark, Lucifer, and Mel are going down the road, and just there's a really quick blip, and I think it was like kind of the first immersion into like the surreal and the absurd is you just see that quick blip of there's like a car accident, there's like a woman covered in blood, and she's like reaching out for help.
I didn't even catch
that.
it.
I missed that.
Yeah, no, I noticed it, and I guess before, like, I had seen it so many times, and I looked at it that time, and then the next thing you see in his camcorder is Montgomery at a bench that says "God help us."
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But no, like it's interesting having that, and we talked about the Warhol reference because I think like in his later years, like Warhol became more interested in like video recordings. I actually I visited. Well, I say this because I visited the Dali Museum, and when they had the Warhol exhibit, and there was like a room dedicated to like just weird. They weren't even movies. It was just like weird short things that Warhol would record.
Yeah, I mean, you'd go to a Warhol party and he'd have videos of himself eating cheeseburgers, or of like one person he filmed sleeping for 12 hours.
Right.
Like.
Yeah.
So then you have Dark, who is like behind the camcorder, and like the final scene opens with him like doing like a monologue, and then you see like he's like suspended the camera like above his bed to like get that angle. And when you think about it, that whole final scene happens underneath that camera.
I think that you're actually right here. Not that I'm surprised that you're right, but I'm moving. Like you brought up, I think
because the most surreal things happen through the camera lens. Like, I mean, there are some things where he sees surreal things outside of the camera, but for the most part, like the absurd happens through the lens of the camera, and then we have that final scene, which is like the peak absurdity of the movie.
I mean, do you even know how many different ways you can unpack that?
Yeah.
Oh my god! Like as a statement on just filmmaking in general.
Yeah.
As a statement on, I love that you paralleled Andy Warhol, the actual like physical figure, with the James Duval analog. 'Cause I never even thought of the way he used his video recording as a means of art. I saw it as a means of like desperate expression, but I didn't actually see it as like, yeah, actually.
Because he even mentions in passing at one point where he's talking to Cowboy, I think he's gonna like shoot a music video for his band.
So he's a video artist. How did that skip by me, dude? I guess because he seemed like he didn't have anything to express.
Yeah.
He tried desperately though, like to articulate what was going on. Like, my generation's doomed. You're gonna live to see the end of days. You can see it in my eyes. That was actually a really good sequence.
Yeah.
Too. That was also a really poignant one. Araki had skill, and like every time he would go tender, which wasn't too often in this film. Like I said, it didn't betray like the surrealist, absurdist language he set up beforehand. It was still colorful. It was still obscene, because I believe that the philosophical concepts they were trying to touch upon are still obscene. In a world that is that full of like nihilism, then tenderness is obscene, or then like self-reflection and rumination is obscene. So it still fits in. It even makes like, you know, everything's still profane, even if it's profound, which is really cool. Right. Yeah, I would call this a equally profane and profound movie. I'm very proud of that wordplay. I had to repeat it. But let's get into the alien abduction.
Yeah, we touched on that lightly, but I guess we didn't really get into like what the meaning of that was, especially considering that's literally what the final scene like played on.
Yeah.
And Bader, you said like earlier that the I was with you.
Yeah.
Because he was obviously telegraphing some sort of alien abduction coming. I mean, there were a lot of alien. By the third time I saw all these alien motifs, I'm like, wait, it's not outside the realm of possibilities for this insane film to have aliens in it. What did you think when they actually showed up?
Well, here's my perspective. So I walked in here thinking we're just gonna watch this like '90s like gay movie about two guys like liking each other, and like that's pretty much it. That's all I thought we were gonna watch. And then when the movie started, I think the first like alien scene was when the alien like shot those three girls across the street, right?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, he might be like hallucinating or something. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna let that one go.
Yeah, I didn't take it seriously.
Yeah, I didn't take it seriously at all. I was like, okay, whatever. And then, God, what was the second one? Was it when
I guess
they were playing like tag or something?
Kick the can.
Yeah. So that, like, after seeing that, I was like, okay, what is this movie? Like, this isn't just about like this guy like liking another guy. This is like way more complex than I thought. And I mean, I liked it. Don't get me wrong. It just threw me off. Like,
oh no, I think it's definitely supposed to throw you off.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of funny because that scene with Kick the Can, you got Montgomery, and he runs into Cowboy, and Cowboy was like, "Oh, like the boogeyman's gonna get you," kind of thing, and you're like,
sure
okay, with the way the film's going, I'm sure the boogeyman's gonna appear. And then literal seconds later, you see the fucking claw come from off screen and wrap around Montgomery.
I knew, well, it was telegraphed super heavily, so I don't think that's no mistake on Araki's part. He built up the framework of the film so well that anything could happen in that movie, and it would still be like logically consistent because the movie's so like incredibly illogical.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I think about the alien abduction stuff, I let it wash over me for the most part watching it, because I didn't think I was supposed to take it seriously, because I thought I was supposed to take the alien abductions as seriously as I was taking, like, the hyper-hetero fucking, like, sex parties.
Yeah, well, there was, like, definitely a play on the whole, like, 90s, like, televangelist.
Yeah, see, that's where I'm going towards.
Because they were talking about the rapture.
Because that's what resonated a lot more with me. Yeah. And especially James Duval's confessional, a video recording confessional of himself. What resonated a lot more with me was the idea of apocalypse, the idea of doom, the idea of that specific, as James Duval, like, they are the specific generation that will witness the end of days. And also Jordan Ladd's character, when she first appears, busting out of her fucking outfit, like, talking, she's telling someone about the apocalypse. Montgomery, about how, oh, you don't know? This is like the end of days. This is the rapture. We're all going to die. So that resonated a lot more with me. So the destruction that Gregg Araki chooses to incorporate into this film is one that's absurd, one that is of B-movie consistency and like B-movie language. It's like we're saying with the meta and the self-reference as well, because he's referencing pre-existing films and pre-existing like bad ideas of aliens, like Day the Earth Stood Still ideas of aliens.
Oh yeah, no, the alien is literally like a guy walking around in a fucking lizard suit.
Yeah,
so
that's
I think that each generation gets the apocalypse that they deserve, and this film is like every generation experiences its own end.
Right.
I mean, we all become irrelevant at some point. And I think Araki's making another kind of cultural statement this time about we were adding nothing to the world. We're building all of our philosophies, like Tarantino included. All these great people I've talked about, Coppola, like they're building all of their work off of pre-existing things, like Andy Warhol fucking soup cans and all these people who've existed long before them, like great thinkers, and they're just not adding anything to it.
Well, with that theme, it's funny because there's when you get to the end, it's like the bottom line is like there's no salvation.
Yes. Because
when she brings up Armageddon Day, she's like, oh, it's about Jesus coming back and everyone's gonna be raptured and then the world gets destroyed. Which, if you're like familiar with like the concept of the rapture, it's about the people who follow Jesus are going to get taken away before the world gets destroyed. However, like that news segment, she's talking about, all these disappearances of like teens, and they're coming back and saying that they were abducted by aliens. So they were taken away, but then they get put right back into the fucking tribulation.
Yeah.
They get taken away, but they're right back in the shitstorm.
Absolutely.
And
if Nietzsche's famous for saying God is dead and we have killed him, then Gregg Araki is showing us a universe where we forgot that we even murdered him. Like, we
Wow.
just forgot.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not because we've had too many things on our mind. It's just because, fuck it, just forgot about it. And I do view the Montgomery character as an analog for something very pure. If not a Jesus character, then Jesus' only follower in this entire film. He's the most pure of spirit, most definitely. I love the two colored eyes.
Yeah.
'Cause that goes with, like, the bisexuality, like the duality, I guess, that not even a duality, it's just a complete, I don't know, what am I looking for here, man? Fluid idea of life,
even,
of existence.
Yeah. Well, there is the duality because you do have the contrast between like human and alien.
Yeah, but
then that gets blurred at the
I just
end,
think it's more
at the
complicated than just two
right.
analogs. I think
Right.
it's more like a multitude, like Twister, just a multitude of different colors to get into.
Well, it's like the mirror thing I was talking about. You have the duality, and then it bounces back and forth between each other until it's like an infinite void.
An infinite void. Okay, and also if Nietzsche stared into the abyss, I wish it was lighted by Gregg Araki, because Gregg Araki, this is a film about staring into the abyss, but this is so colorful. I could stare into this abyss for fucking ever, man. This is a pretty nihilistic film, but I maybe pat it on the back for being one of like the only 5 positive nihilist films.
Right.
Like I still don't feel bad walking away from this movie. Or hopeless, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's funny because we talked about like the framing of like the tenderness between Dark and Montgomery at the end, and then it's like it becomes the most sporadic. It goes from being the most tender moment to the most sporadic, where Montgomery begins convulsing, and they're both like screaming, and like he's like shaking him, and he's like, "Tell me what's wrong," and then bang,
bang, boom,
yeah.
And
see you later.
Yeah, no, they just got done talking like, you know, don't, like, you can stay the night, but don't ever leave me. And then Montgomery is like, of course. And then as soon as he explodes and like the alien within him is there, he just says gotta go or whatever. And,
because definitely then the Montgomery is definitely a metaphor for salvation, for the inability to actually hold salvation, especially appearing, like you said, next to that God can't save us or God can't help us bench or whatever.
Yeah.
And
God help us,
and James Duval was like a second away from salvation. He found what he was looking for for the entire film. Even if he wasn't aware he was looking for it, he found it. But you can't hold it in your hands; it's gone.
Yeah,
you know.
Gotcha.
But it's not like it. At the same time, it's not as like profound as what I'm saying, because it's still filmed within the language of pop art and postmodernism. So it's still like, it's still a deeply pointless tenderness capitalized on by a very, very loud explosion of bombast. So,
right.
Yeah.
Any other topics, guys?
No, but I'd recommend watching this movie multiple times before, like, because there's a lot of like subliminal like messages here and there. Like,
there's
one blink and you miss like 5 things.
Oh yeah, no, it's very, like we said earlier, it literally is 90210 on acid, and there's so many different layers, so many things you have to digest. This is actually the first time I viewed it, and it also gave me like flashes of like Evil Dead. Especially with the Elvis character, like his facial expressions reminded me of
Bruce Campbell.
Yes, it reminded. Oh, Bruce Campbell, Campbell Soup. Wow, there's gotta be
a reference there.
But no, like the facial expressions, especially when he gets covered in blood and he's like in that that moment of like the manic. Takeover.
It's like when he's killing his hand that's possessed or whatever, and he has to put on his chainsaw thing, and the blood splattering all over his face, and he's laughing maniacally. I picked that up too. Too bad Sam Raimi never tackled anything interesting. On that note, any closing thoughts?
Wow. Yeah.
Actually, where do you think? Okay, this is actually a good topic. It's not necessarily an analytical topic. But so far as queer cinema goes, this film doesn't really make a lot of short lists of like essential watches.
No,
I actually thought it was very good, and you pointed out that it's kind of getting a new cult can you just talk about how it's kind of getting a new kind of cult respect and how difficult it is to find a physical form of
Oh, well, yeah, sure thing. It's funny because this movie's out of print. I know you can find VHS copies of it. I don't even know if you can find like DVD copies of it anymore. So it's very difficult to even get your hands on it. It's not streaming anywhere.
I Jack Sparrowed this shit. So.
Yeah, and it's funny because at the time, like if you read any reviews between like 1997 and like the early 2000s of this movie, it was critically panned. Like by far, this is Gregg Araki's most critically panned movies, and I think it has garnered more of a cult following now. And if you find like a more recent review of the movie, it's given a much more positive spin. I think it was like really ahead of its time, and I think kind of what I said earlier, when you watch the movie, it feels like you're watching a movie that was made recently about the 90s. Because versus like it actually being from
the 90s, for
yeah.
being as crazy as it fucking is and as over stylized as it is, as over composed on purpose, it's aged really, really well for being as energetic as it is.
Yeah,
because even the best like super energetic like Train Spotting actually hasn't aged too well. I think it's a great movie, but like it's so full of 90s tropes that it's almost like impossible not to see them as flaws now. But Nowhere, in contrast to something like Train Spotting, is also over-composed and loud. Great music. We should also say that the soundtrack is amazing.
Soundtrack is
Actually, the right before the post-credits scene, it was like the soundtrack of Nowhere is available on Mercury Records or something like that. So go buy it already. But it's true. It's such a good fucking soundtrack.
Everything about it aged well. Actually, I don't see any part of this film as a relic of the 90s.
Right.
I think that it actually somehow...
That's what I mean. It feels like it was made recently. Like
it was very modern for its time.
It's
perfectly aged. Actually, I feel like it was too 90s for its time somehow, and that now those... I think this Araki was both ahead of his time and completely stuck within it. Like, I don't know how to explain that, but I can definitely see why the new cult status is being garnered around this film. I support the cult status. I think it should be essential. I think that a company like Criterion should definitely put out this film, especially if it's this hard to find. There's certainly an audience for it. There's 3 people in this room. That's it. That's all you need. All right, now any closing thoughts?
Again, I'll definitely watch it again. I'm planning on Jack Sparrowing it because I can't find it anywhere apparently. But yeah, I'm definitely watching it again just to see like what I missed.
Yeah, actually, I was right. Looking it up, there is a DVD format of it, but it's not even region 1 like US.
That's what I figured.
It was made in the UK.
Oh, so
as far as US release goes, it was never released past VHS.
Oh my god! They need to get on that movie, and they need to get on Richard Linklater's Suburbia. Was never released in DVD, and that's incredible. There's so many incredible '90s art films that they've never touched, and that they're starting to be like a nostalgic audience for it. And they really should get it out there. My closing thoughts are: we should probably cover at least the other 2 films in this trilogy. I think that would be interesting to cover on the channel.
Yeah. Well, because all 3 of those. Well, I mean, they're literally what the title is, the Teenage Apocalypse trilogy. It's about themes of like the end and like looking for salvation and looking for something, looking for meaning.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the final film in the trilogy?
Yes. The final in like... It's funny because like you expect some kind of resolve. I don't know, maybe there is resolve, but it's kind of like you have Dark talking about, I know there's got to be one person out there in the world who can, hold me and tell me everything's going to be okay, and then quite the opposite happens. He gets left behind. No pun intended.
The other part of my closing thoughts was that I'd call it a very masterful postmodernist film. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It's funny because some of the critics of the time were saying like this movie lacked direction, but I would say it was
No.
coming from every direction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And,
yes.
and there was so many
To say it like
there was so many like blatant like symbols commenting on art.
Yes.
Like it definitely had a motivation behind it. It was very thought out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How can you? You can never say this film lacks composure. If anything, it's like overcomposed, as like I was saying,
Yeah.
in a really good way, though. In a way that I think even helps the self-referential attitude that you were talking about earlier. Like, we are constantly aware that there is an architect to this film because it is like very available and present. Like, his direction is very overt. Like, you could see all the cuts on purpose.
Yeah.
And like the song changes it's just perfect.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
What are your closing thoughts, Joey?
Oh gosh, did everyone else do theirs
I
yet?
already did mine. Yeah, you're the last one.
Oh, sorry, I was like zoned out for a second. I was still trying to think of that word from earlier. I'll be on the next podcast. I'm sure I'll have thought of it
Guys,
by
if
then.
we don't wrap this up, this analysis will be just as long as the movie.
All right, let's shoot for it. We got like what, 10 more minutes?
We got 10 more minutes.
All right,
Holy
let's no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I would say, funnily enough, like despite the horrible reviews that this got and the fact that it's completely out of print and near impossible to get unless you find the VHS tape on eBay or something, it's my favorite movie of his by far, because it's honestly like kind of like iconic in terms of its cult status now, and
It's getting there. I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years.
like
it wasn't
I
huge.
would say iconic like as far as like people who enjoy his films, I guess.
Right.
And it's definitely iconic in new queer cinema for sure.
It's gotta be. It's gotta be, right?
The whole trilogy is though,
Yeah.
honestly, the whole trilogy. Yeah, I would say like I love everything about it. I love the soundtrack. I love the costuming and hair and makeup and the set
sets,
design.
yeah.
It just all it honestly, like, as chaotic as it is, everything about the movie like fits together like a puzzle for me. Like everything has intent behind it, and I would say it's
and I think it's well intentioned too.
Yeah.
Like, it's good intent.
right.
I think the most fascinating parts are the artistic, the commentary on art that you were talking about.
Mhm.
I think that's the most fascinating part of the film because I think it's really biting and really like.
Yeah.
And
And it's honestly like a perfect movie for like me because I do have like a short attention span sometimes, and it really like it's almost like assaulting. Like it literally demands your attention. Like you can't look away from the screen. It's very fast paced and
hyperkinetic.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent movie. All right, thank you for watching this video or listening to this discussion. This is Zachary Conan.
Joey.
Bader.
All right. What's a good quote to end on from Nowhere, Joey? Give me a good
What
Nowhere
was it?
insult.
God, what was it called?
Uh,
You were gonna write it down on Twitter or
I
something. I,
know.
forgot what it was.
Wait, hold on,
Face
pause
bitch
it.
beagle. I don't
Something
remember
like
what it
that.
wait.
We got to think of a good quote to end this on.
I guess I would say,
Tell me the Atari said, "Thanks for the bitchin' wheels, bitch."
There we go.